Well, cracks are showing in an already fragile truce between the U.S. and Iran. Overnight, President Trump issued a new warning for Tehran. He announced that U.S. forces will stay in the region and said that if Iran does not comply with the agreement, then, quote, the shooting starts bigger and better and stronger than anyone has ever seen before. Iran is accusing the U.S. and Israel of violating the ceasefire. The Israeli military launched massive strikes on Lebanon yesterday, killing at least 182 people. Tehran says this goes against the deal, but Vice President J.D. Vance says it's all a misunderstanding.
I think the Iranians thought that the ceasefire included Lebanon, and it just didn't. We never made that promise. We never indicated that was going to be the case. What we said is that the ceasefire would be focused on Iran, and the ceasefire would be focused on America's allies, both Israel and the Gulf Arab states.
And Iranian media reports Tehran is responding to the perceived violation by suspending tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. However, yesterday afternoon, the White House called these reports false. You can see on this map, only a few vessels actually crossed the waterway despite the deal. And stock futures are inching down this morning, backing off from a powerful rally yesterday as investors celebrated what some saw as a potential end to the war. The Dow surged more than 1,300 points. The Nasdaq rose more than 600, a 2.8% gain. And the S&P 500 jumped about 166 points. We have team coverage for you this morning. Imtiaz Tyab is following the latest in the Middle East from Doha, Qatar. Ramy Inocencio is tracking Strait of Hormuz traffic from our London bureau. Well, let's start with CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi in our D.C. bureau. Olivia, good morning. So, Vice President Vance will lead talks with Iran this weekend. What are you hearing from the White House?
Well, good morning to you, Michael. The White House at this moment is expressing cautious optimism. They feel fundamentally that they are in a good spot. They say that the Strait of Hormuz is open or somewhat open, and some traffic will be moving through. There is a fragile ceasefire in place, and they are about to send the Vice President, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and the President's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, to Islamabad to have these negotiations. We know the Iranians are heading there later today. So cautious optimism is where they are at right now. And last night, President Trump on Truth Social reiterated that the military is going to stay in the region for as long as needed until he says, quote, a real agreement is reached and fully complied with. In that, he also said no nuclear weapons and the Strait of Hormuz will be open and safe. So that appears to be the two key tenors of any deal that could be reached at this moment. Vice President Vance last night, when he was returning from Hungary to the U.S. before he heads back to Pakistan, said that the three demands on the nuclear front will actually be no capacity to build a nuclear weapon, no enriching towards a nuclear weapon, and Iran must give up their nuclear fuel. Also, take a listen to Caroline Leavitt yesterday in the press briefing talking about the core tenets of a deal as well.
The president's red lines, namely the end of Iranian enrichment in Iran, have not changed. And the idea that President Trump would ever accept an Iranian wish list as a deal is completely absurd. The president will only make a deal that serves in the best interests of the United States of America, and he as a negotiating team will focus on this effort over the next 2 weeks.
Now, Michael, we are expecting that negotiating team to leave sometime in the next few hours to head towards Pakistan for those in-person negotiations.
All right, Olivia Rinaldi in Washington, thank you. Well, for more on the situation in the Middle East, we turn now to CBS News senior foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tyab in Doha, Qatar. Imtiaz, good morning. So what are we hearing from Iran this morning, and could Israel's attacks on Lebanon cause this fragile ceasefire to collapse?
Good morning to you. Well, look, I think there is a very serious potential of that. When we look at the images coming out of Beirut yesterday, the extraordinary damage by that huge volley of Israeli missiles, which caused so many casualties. We understand at least 300 casualties. It really just underscores just how fragile this ceasefire is. Iran, of course, making it clear that Lebanon is part of it. The U.S. saying, hang on a second, that isn't the case. I would suspect, though, that there is going to be some sort of work going on in the background to kind of find some path forward, maybe that means limited strikes on Hezbollah targets inside of Lebanon while these talks continue. But it's very clear, having listened to Vice President J.D. Vance and indeed from Iranian officials that we've been trying to make contact to, that they are very invested in this ceasefire, very vested in those talks in Islamabad, which are scheduled for Saturday. But again, this is a very shaky ceasefire, and as we've been hearing, they can unravel at any moment. But I think it is pretty safe to say that there's a lot of forces at play here who want this to work, want it to hold, and I suspect we very will likely see those talks go ahead this weekend in the Pakistani capital.
Yeah, Imtiaz, I wanted to ask about it. With tensions this high, was there talk about the peace talks being canceled? Is it still on?
Right now, it is. I was speaking with some Pakistani officials just this morning. They feel very confident that these talks will take place. The scene in the Pakistani capital, Islamabad, is of a capital city which is prepared for these kind of talks. The military has taken over huge sections of the city. They've set up shipping containers, set up roadblocks, and really have essentially created what would be described as a safe zone for this very high-profile delegation. Pakistan, of course, while it has very close relations with Iran, it has very warming relations with the U.S., which is something that has really only started over the past year. Previous relationships with the Pakistani leadership in Washington have been very fraught, and now we see this country, which has emerged as what can only be described as neutral ground for these talks to take place. They themselves, the Pakistanis that is, do have a vested interest in these talks moving forward. But those big questions about tankers moving through the Strait of Hormuz, big questions about whether or not Israel will stop its strikes on Lebanon, those still remain. But it does feel that at least at this moment that those talks will continue. But we have to keep saying they are incredibly fragile, just as fragile as this ceasefire is. Back to you.
All right, Imtiaz, Tyab in Doha, thank you. We've been talking about the Strait of Hormuz, how critical it is. For more on that, we're joined by CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio. Ramy, good morning. So what are you seeing there? And are there any signs that Tehran's chokehold over the strait is easing?
Michael, good morning there. Yeah, no sign at all right now. Iran appears to still be very much in control of the strait. And I'm looking at the price of oil right now. It has jumped back up, and that implies that things are not going smoothly with this ceasefire and that details still need to be ironed out. A barrel of Brent right now, this is global crude, is now at the highs of the day, over $98 a barrel. A reminder, it had fallen to about $91 after the deal was announced, so up by about $7 there. One factor is a new map that we're seeing. This is coming from the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy that was released overnight. There it is on your screen. Take a look at that shaded circle on the right-hand side. That Persian text there in bold translates to danger zone. Now, one suggestion out there is that Iran has mined this area of the strait. You can also see arrows at the top of that map, and the IRGC says that ships sailing out would need to sail south of Larak Island. Now, we've talked about Larak Island before, right? This is the so-called toll booth that Iran could use to rake in something like $100 billion each year if they charged each ship the $2 million that at least we know one ship was charged a couple weeks ago. Ships sailing in would need to sail north of Larak Island there. In addition, another factor is Hezbollah in Lebanon and Israel continuing to strike targets of Hezbollah. Israel has said that this is Operation Eternal Darkness. Yesterday, they hit something like 100 sites, according to the IDF. Because of all this, Iran says that it has suspended that tanker traffic through Hormuz. Iran says that the ceasefire means Israel should stop striking Hezbollah, but Israel and the U.S. say that the ceasefire does not cover that. And Iran's deputy foreign minister weighed in on this pushback on our partner channel, the BBC, and had this to say. Take a listen.
It was a grave violation, intentional grave violation of the ceasefire. You cannot have a cake and eat it at the same time. That was the message that Iran sent quite clearly, crystal clearly to Washington and to the Oval Office last night. And our foreign minister also said that you cannot ask for a ceasefire and then accept terms and conditions, accept the areas that ceasefire is applied to, and name Lebanon, exactly Lebanon in that, and then your ally just start a massacre.
And the latest numbers we have of ships transiting through the Strait of Hormuz is just 3 ships yesterday after the ceasefire was announced. All 3 of those have links to Iran. And, of course, floating over all of this, Iran's warning that any ship trying to get through needs to get permission from Iran, or, in their words, would be targeted and destroyed. Michael.
All right, Ramy and Inocencio, thank you.